Hello and welcome to part 5 of my educational long range hunting series. And this video is, as the title says, it's going to be all about hand loading, custom loads, not factory loads basically. So to kick it off, we kind of need to ask a question, is why hand load? Why should we be running hand loads if we want to be building our long range hunting rifles? I will give you an answer that I believe fits the bill, basically, because we're trying to create precise, custom ammunition that matches your particular rifle and all its features inside that rifle. Basically, factory ammunition or mass-produced ammunition has to account for every rifle that's sort of been in production, that it can load, that it can shoot through any rifle on the market, whether it's old 1960s, 1970s, you name it. It needs to be able to do that more or less. What we find, even with premium factory ammunition, we find quite major weaknesses when comparing it to precisely hand-loaded ammunition. And so that, some people say, nah, really? Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, really. Because numbers don't lie. We can test those results coming out of factory ammunition, and we realize pretty quick, even if it's, you know, fairly expensive factory ammunition, where they may have slowed down their quality control just a little bit more, the consistency of that ammunition is still not that great at all. Or the velocities are extremely low, so that's why you get pretty good groupings and things like that. But when you really start getting into the nitty-gritties and you start breaking it down, you realize factory ammunition, I liken it like this. It's kind of like building a funny car, like a drag race car or an extremely high-powered drift car, and then you go and stick like 91 octane fuel in it. You've got everything there, but you're holding it back by putting the wrong octane inside. You know, you want to be running 98 or E85. You want to be running something that's really going to give as much punch as it can. And so this is why I believe factory ammunition just really lets us long range hunters down, and why a lot of guys enter into the reloading cult, because that is what it is, and find their sweet spots there for their rifles with their chosen projectile and powder and all that sort of stuff. That is why it is important to be running hand loads through your long range precision rifle, because the factories producing like Hornady and Nosler and Norma and all those sorts of factories don't have the time to actually go through as precise as we do to really make sure that ammunition is as best as they can get it. They just need to produce the stuff so that it's good enough to get it out the door, to get it on the shelves, and it's going to shoot okay, maybe. And the speeds, who cares, because people who are shooting factory usually aren't chronographing and things like that. They're just trying to get it out the door and make the sales, which is completely fair enough. So I had a 6.5 Creedmoor. I've had more than one, and I was using Precision Hunter 143 grain ELDX, and this was kind of my first introduction into using factory ammunition, and I sort of noticed like the deer that I was hitting in close was still not being hit with a hydrostatic shock. Within 20 or 30 yards, it still felt like I was shooting them at 300 or 400. So I brought pitch to chronograph, and the advertised speed was 2,700 feet per second. But I was actually getting an average speed of 2,570 feet per second out of a 22-inch barrel, and my extreme spread was up at 85. So if you have no idea what I just said, extreme spread is basically if you have a velocity, you take 5 shots, you take in those shots there'll be different speeds, different velocities. You take that, you take the spread over those velocities from the lowest to the highest. So you got 85 feet per second difference between the different shots where they sat in between. And so that all may look well at 100 yards, but it's when you start going out, your velocities start really messing with your groups. So anyway, there you go. Advertised speed was way down. That's why I wasn't getting that sort of lovely shock factor. And so what I did is I grabbed some hand loading gear. I was just using like Hornady brass, Reloader 17, I believe the powder was, and I loaded 143 ELDX, exactly the same projectile. I was getting an extreme spread of 25 feet per second, and I averaged 2805 feet per second from the muzzle. So I gained a whole lot of velocity. I also brought my variance down somewhat, over halved, and so all of a sudden I had a more consistent group that was way further out, going faster, much better, precise ammunition, and that was inside a Ruger American to fit and match the maximum pressure that chamber could take. Then I did another one, I'll do 3 of these. I did another one, I did a 300 Remington Ultra Mag. So I wanted to do a big 300. I was shooting Precision Hunter 220 ELDX. That had an extreme spread of 87 feet per second. It was advertised at 2910. Extreme spread of 87 feet per second. That had a advertised velocity of 2910 from the muzzle out of a 26-inch barrel. I was getting 2830 out of a 26-inch barrel, Remington 700, and I was only getting like 1 MOA groups with that, which is, to be honest, for a 300 rum is actually okay. So what I did is I canned that as well. I purchased some Hornady 225 ELD match, so 5 grains heavier than what I was shooting, through hand loading using US 869 powder. I got my extreme spreads down to 32 feet per second, just using Hornady brass again, and was averaging 2988 feet per second. So slightly heavier projectile, better spreads, better groups, better gun. Then my last one was a 7mm Remington Magnum. This is just another one I recorded because I thought this one was a shocker. It was using Seiko Powerhead 150 grain factory ammunition. The advertised velocity was 2927 out of a 24-inch barrel. The velocity was 2626 feet per second from the muzzle, a whole 300 feet per second slower. Then we hand loaded with that rifle, got 162 grain ELD, traveling at 2960 with an extreme spread of 9, which is fantastic. There's many other, I have shot a lot of other factory ammunition, but I didn't actually record it and I can't remember. But basically have moved my way through different cases and brands and how to do it all to get your spreads down low, speeds up high, different powder charges and things like that. But there you go, that gives you an idea. This is kind of, I'm trying to convince you that hand loading is the way to go, because it really is. So when you see that factory ammunition, even if it's cheaper stuff, and everybody says, look, it shoots really well, I'm hitting steel out at 600 yards with it, just know that factory ammunition always runs dirtier, so it fouls up your barrels quicker. Factory ammunition always has a bad extreme spread, which means your groups can be good at 100 yards, but they will open up as you go further out. Factory ammunition as well is always running slower. I say that, sometimes it's not, sometimes they're bang on, but But most of the times the velocities are definitely running slower than what they advertise. And I've only had 1 or 2 actually land on where they should have been, but everything else has always been slower. So I guess that kind of begs the question of, what happens if you don't want to reload? What happens if you just think, look dude, I just want to take my rifle out and go hunting? Well, what I've done is I've put a couple of little checklists in here that I think whoever you engage to do your reloading, there's a few things that are important that they sort of need to be doing, which will prove that they understand, that they know what they are doing. I believe the 3 things that you need to check, that you're not like engaging some rogue guy who's just chucking powder in a case, is you need to check if they ultrasonically clean their brass. I would check if they neck turn and if they trim their cases. And I would also check that they have a chronograph. If they don't have those kind of 3 things, they're probably not in the realm of like a good candidate to choose a long range hunting load with. If they've got those kind of 3 things, they've probably got their head screwed on well enough that they can help you out there. But what I'm going to do, now that's my waffle, I hope it was slightly convincing that hand loading is definitely the way to go. I'm going to bring you over to my loading gear, which to be honest is not super duper expensive stuff, and I'm going to go over, and I know I'm kind of opening myself up to the reloading cult here, and I just want to make it clear I'm not a target shooter, so I'm not trying to hit a 10 100 times at 1,000 yards. But I guess the same principles apply, but I don't dump heaps of money into my reloading gear. I don't even like really things electronic. I think a phone is hard enough to use, let alone all this electronic reloading gear that could kind of go wrong. So I'm kind of old school like that. But I'll bring you over to how my process works as I work through my reloading. There is a lot that could be said about this. In fact, you could start a whole YouTube channel on this topic of reloading. Because it's extremely scientific. But for me, I just get to the point where I say, enough's enough. I'm really happy with the way my loads are shooting. I'm really happy with how they're grouping at 800 yards, and I'm done. So I'll bring you over and I'll go through the different components that you need really quickly, and then I'll go through how I go through my process of loading and some of the things that I've learned along the way that have really helped me achieve really, really low extreme spreads and good accuracy. So come along. Oh, you could have a look at this. What is it? Oh yes, it's looking really good. I just have to put this in this video quickly. This is my 26 Nosler build. So this is just an older Savage 110 that has a Criterion 6.5mm barrel on it. But yeah, look at this baby here. So that's going to be my next load development. 147 ELD match out of the 26 Nosler. Woo! Exciting. Really exciting. So it's actually built on a 338 Lapua length action. So I have got so much room for seating depths and lands and things like that. But anyway, let's come over here. Let's get set up. Okay, so really quickly, let's just go over the most basic. So you start with a case, all right? Obviously, you need a case. You need a primer, which goes like so in the back of the case. And you need gunpowder. Oh yeah, I got some of that. Whew. And you need a projectile. There you go. So those are the components of making up a hand load. And if you don't know that, you're really at the beginning. But that's okay. Right, so that's the componentry that you'll need to make up your hand load, and then you're going to need a whole bunch of tools, obviously, to do that. And I will show you what I like to use. All right, so here is a press. This is sort of where you do all your sizing and your seating. So when I say sizing, so basically here's a set of dies for the 26 Nosler, and pretty much you'll have a sizing die here which takes the case and makes the neck of the case the right size again, and punches out the spent primer. So basically what I'll do is, even if I get brand new brass, I will go through and resize all of it straight away. And the reason why I do that is because if there's any kind of like this here is a Lapua brass, which is annealed as well to make it a bit softer, and this is 284 Winchester brass. Well, actually it's 6.5 284, what I've necked it up to 7mm. But basically, if there's any dents in the necks, I will go through and resize all 100 of those. And then, so obviously, in order to resize them, you'll need to use a bit of case lube so that you're not straining and everything runs through nicely. So you run that through your die set. I just do that because I feel, in my mind, I know I've gone through and made everything consistent again. So I run it through the same die. I'm not relying on some factory die. It's my own die, and I know next time when I reload these, it's back into my die. And I like that. Then what I'll do, even if it's brand new brass, I'll come over with it. So it's all been sized up. I will come with my new brass, and I will actually, that was a bit quick. I will actually do a tiny little case trim. And so what this is basically your case sits in here like so, and then it runs a little cutter head, and that cutter head cuts the front of the case perfectly square, but also it means the neck length is perfectly the same as well. And I'll go through, brand new brass, I'll go through the whole lot and do it all again. And then I'll also chamfer the face of that brass again, and I just do everything the same. Everything the same. So this is my chamfering tool. I just do 2 turns. 2 turns. Go through the whole lot, 2 turns. So it's all chamfered, all the edges are nice and smooth, 45 degree, and then I'll come down into here, and I will ever so slightly turn those necks as well, because I've gone through and I've mucked around with it. So all the focus on the brass right now is on the neck part here. And so basically turning a neck just means that your brass is, the neck thickness is identical right the way around. So when you fire that, it opens up to the size of the chambering, and you don't get an inconsistent result upon firing. Now I will say that trimming and neck turning has increased my spreads lots. Quality brass and mucking around with the necks so that they are identical and the same has really done a favor for my reloading. I can honestly say that I didn't used to do it, but I find that even if you use inferior brands, you can get pretty good results. So yeah, let's talk about brands then really quickly on cases. I'd say Lapua is your top brand for consistency and everything like that. I then would use, so this puppy here actually is a Norma. Norma's good. This is a 300 Winchester Magnum. Norma's good as well, very good. Probably not quite as good as Lapua. I haven't even tried wasting time with Winchester or Federal or any of those kind of brands. I would say my third favorite would be Hornady, but Hornady need inspecting and discarding of ones that come out of the factory with bumps and knocks on them and ones that don't, just the necks are damaged. So just, yeah, realize you are going to need to discard some of your Hornady stuff. Definitely. So there you go. That's what I do with my brass. That's all that I do with my brass. Now what I've got over here, if I'm bringing in spent cases, so fired cases, I have an old jewellery ultrasonic cleaner. And I just manually stir that while I'm here. It's noisy and all that sort of stuff, but it was affordable. But I use the proper Hornady cleaner in there as well. Just never really, I can get the carbon and the pockets quite clean, very clean with that. So I've never really felt the need to go and, like, that was $50 I think, secondhand. Never felt the need to go and splash out on a big flash one. So yeah, that's what I use for my cleaner. So ultrasonic cleaning, basically, if you get a case that has been fired like this one here, it cleans up the neck here. It also cleans up the primer pocket. You can see that. That's just come straight out of my cleaner. And it also, you're probably not going to be able to see in here, but it also cleans the inside of the case of carbon. Once that gunpowder in there goes off, it leaves carbon residue in there, which means if you don't clean that out, you get inconsistent capacities between cases. So you're kind of bringing it back to the original size. So between batches of your loads, you really want to get all that carbon out of there. So I think that's important as well if you're really looking for good accuracy. So there you go. There's brass. That's brass. I think brass is quite important. I think most of your time should be put into your brass preparation and cleaning and deburring and just checking things as well, that primer pockets aren't coming loose and things like that. I think I never used to put much time into my brass, but when I started putting a bit more time in, I just noticed the groups just chew and spreads just closed up big time. So that's my brass. I've got all my brass prepped, and then I run this. So this is just a hand, it seats as a primer seater, and this is fine. It's just a Lee product, and it just seats the primer. As long as you bottom it out every time and make sure your primers are seated consistently, then it's all good. I have had a primer turn around in there once and came in backwards, which was not good. So I don't think the rifle would have gone off, but probably would have damaged the bolt face, just maybe a little bit. I don't know. Never fired. It didn't actually get fired, which was good. So in terms of primers, these are my favorite primers, the CCIs, mainly because I found they run like a little hotter. So they're usually running 30 feet per second quicker than other primers. But I'm going to give these ones a try here, like a German Ambode, or I don't know, Hunting and Fishing was selling them, and they're pretty okay priced as well. So I'm going to try those in the 26 Nosler and the 300 Winchester Magnum. But for the 284, I'll run CCIs. Absolutely. So there you go. You prime your cases, and then you're ready to do the kind of the fun stuff. And so I'll bring you over to my sheet, which I religiously write everything down and just record all your data, and always start low with a ladder test. And I'm meaning ladder as in finding pressure signs for that particular rifle. And so I'll take you over to my sheet. So this is my reloading sheet here. No, don't focus on me. This is my reloading sheet here. So basically what I do is I write the rifle down. I actually test the twist rate myself manually on every rifle, just in case there's something not quite right there. And you can do that with your cleaning kit, but that's another video again. Write the barrel length down, so I will, with the cleaning kit, I'll test that. case brand, primer, bullet, powder, overall length. And I usually write the magazine down first, and I then do a dummy round and seat to the lands and just start figuring out the difference there. So I'll put some notes there. And then here I've got a ladder test, which I work through first for pressure. And then I start my groups down through here. So what I'll do is I'll go over my 284 Winchester. Here's a goodie. Yeah. A bit messy, but here, this is what I've done. Whoop. So I've got all my powder and all that stuff listed. I've listed the overall length and I've listed the lands as well. And so I wanted this projectile to be jumping, I don't know, I can't remember. But anyway, so I haven't looked at this in a while, but basically I'll put 1 or 2 signs of pressure. So I don't know why that 2 is there. And I can go over what pressure signs look like. I don't know. Oh yeah, basically this is a ladder test. And I also just do 2 shots, record them with the chronograph. And these are quite rough because I'm just looking for pressure. And I will write some groups down to start getting my head around things. But here's where I actually see I've found on my ladder test that I had 2 signs of pressure and groups started opening up anyway. And that was at 60 grains. And so of powder for this particular rifle and projectile. And so I knock it back. I actually knocked the seating back on this one, I think, a little as well. And start, I'll knock it back a good 1.5 to 2 grains and start working groups. But I found an okay group in there anyway. So that's how I'll do it, basically. That's how I do it. So just write everything down, and you'll start to see patterns and nodes, and you'll realize where you can get to in your next pressure node and things like that. So in terms of, so I'll start with my sheet. I'll start with my ladder test where I just load up 1 grain increments until I get to the pressure signs. For me, where I stop is where I see ejector marks. I'm okay with primer pressures. I say 1 sign of pressure is primer, where your primer starts to kind of sort of bulge out, crater a little bit. You'll see this even on some hot factory ammunition as well. But also, if I start seeing ejector marks, which is on the side of the case, they usually start in a bit of a half moon, they call it, and then they go to a full moon. And when you start pushing past that, you end up with maybe a black eye or something, I don't know. So yeah, I will stop there and then I come a grain down because I'm a hunting rifle. I might get a bit of crap or something in the barrel, like a stick or a leaf, and I don't want to be overpressurized like a target rifle and end up with a black eye or in hospital. So yeah, that's what I do. And so load all those up. In terms of, I'll show you how I do my powder weight charges. Let's have a look. This is all I use. I calibrate this every time. It is just a beam and balance Lee scale. You can pick them up for pretty much nothing, but they are good. And then for rough, basically I'll just trickle that in there and trickle it in with my little trickler. And then once I've got my actual charge, say if I'm loading 58.3, I'll just set that to get within half a grain and put it in there. Come from here, dump it in there, and then trickle up until my powder charge is bang on flush with the top of the scales. And I've never had an issue with this ever, and I never feel the pressure to go electronic because I don't know, this way I can zero it very quickly and I'm happy. I'm a happy camper. Alright, that's pretty much as far as I'm going to go and talk about reloading for your long range rifle. You You could make a lot of videos just on this topic about how to set your rifle up. I mean, yeah, there's so many factors and variables in the reloading cult, as I call it. But at the end of the day, I think, the modern bullets, the modern projectiles, they can jump 100 thou, and they still group really well with good spread. The modern powders we're using as well, as long as you get a good case fill with your powder ratios and things like that, I think reloading really isn't that difficult for long range hunting inside 700 yards. I've even achieved good accuracy with a 308 using those old Lee loader kits, and it's all about just being consistent. It's not about all the fancy gear. It's, can your gear provide consistent results every single time? And I'm pretty content with the gear that I use here, and believe that the results, you know, when you start seeing like rifles grouping 3-4 inches at 800 yards consistently, yeah, I just leave my systems alone. But literally I will pour my powder in from the exact same place in my scales every single time. Like if I'm tapping, I do a lot of tapping, so tapping powder in and tapping the case down, and I'll just do everything the same. I tap the side of that case 4 times, and I tap the powder in 4 times, and everything's exactly the same, and you can achieve some pretty good results. I do think a chronograph is necessary as well, because that'll give you and you can go and rent one from a gun shop. Don't go and put a bullet through it, but you can go and rent one. But that'll give you an idea of how good your reloads are. If you're getting bad spreads where you're just like, oh man, that was like 120 extreme spread, my first point of call is usually it's your brass. Your brass is not up to the task, so you're getting inconsistent results and things like that. So yeah, there you go. That's my video on reloading. If you've got questions, fire away, but if there's enough questions, I'll probably just make a video on the questions, because there is a lot of I learned all of this trial and error, where I didn't really follow anyone. I didn't really ask anyone's opinion. People were trying to tell me their opinions. I didn't really listen. Probably was over pressurizing some rifles, and I've kind of backed down a bit from that now. So kind of a lot of trial and error, and just observing and measuring, and I write everything down. Everything, I write it down. I've actually got 2 books that I just write all my observations in, because I think as a hand loader, this really is the scientific part of long range hunting, because the more you'll get a real feel for the different cartridges and how they behave with certain powders and things like that. And some cartridges just don't behave well. Some are very finicky on seating depths, and some projectiles are different, and there's a lot to it. But yeah, I think get yourself alongside someone who's done it for a while would be good, or just start. If you just want to get into reloading, just go and get yourself a 308. They're pretty forgiving. And just start hand loading and just play with it. You do have to be dedicated to going to the range, but there is nothing better than getting lots of practice behind the trigger, because you'll be a better long range hunter. If you're shooting groups all the time, you'll really start to figure out wind. It'll make you a very good long range hunter. So I hope you enjoyed that. The next one will be coming out soon, so stick around, and thanks for watching. See ya.